Hello, and welcome to another guide. This one will be covering Rage Juggernaut. This will be a full guide, so I'll be going over everything, including stats and defenses as well, even though I do have dedicated videos for those things. So if you're interested in defenses on other classes, I do have a video dedicated for Arena and 8v8s for every single class in the game. I also explain other mechanics like damage reduction, internal and elemental damage reduction as well. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. I'll leave a little thing here and then I'll leave it in the description as well. And then I also have a gear video where I cover all the best in slot stats and then how to obtain those without wasting too much credits and or wasting your stats too much. If you're interested in that as well, I'll put that in the description. Now, if you're interested in Focus's counterparts, which is basically Rage Republic version, all my abilities will be in the same spot for Republic. The only difference really is when you go to your skill tree. The positioning of the talents won't be in the same spot for Focus. However, what they do will still be the same. So again, if you're looking for Focus specific stuff, just feel free to ask. I'll be happy to clarify. Anyway, getting into it, we want to start off with what is the playstyle, or I guess the role of Rage. It's always been more of a brawler with good tools for dueling, but after 7.0's changes, it's even better than it used to be. Nowadays, it doesn't just do good at dueling, but it excels at it. It also has far more uptime on mobility than before, allowing it to kind of remove the ideal of Juggernauts being slow and immobile. This is essentially the identity of Fury Marauder, if anything, but, you know, here we are. As a melee, it's your job to frontline, but as Rage specifically, you excel at burst and control. You're a great tool at shutting down players, and even more so, sorcerers. So when it comes to target choices, backlines are great. It's an extremely aggressive playstyle, and not really designed to live, but has good tools to bait things out in smaller skirmishes. Being able to take full advantage of your movement and leap is highly important, and its rotational core needs to become muscle memory to fully excel at its potential. Like they say, a good offense is the best defense. Alright, now to go over gearing, stats, implants, and tacticals. So if you're interested in min-maxing your gear and not wasting any credits, in general, I highly recommend checking out my best in slot gearing video. It includes all the critical diminishing returns. So if you're someone that likes to min-max, I highly recommend checking out that video. Otherwise, getting into our stats here, we have the standard 4850 critical DR for this class, or a spec. Most melee do have the same critical DR. Not all of them, but most of them do. So the standard build is right here. This is what I usually use for most classes. Then the whole concept of alacrity is that you're going over 2054. The reason for that is the 1.4 GCD threshold. You can go higher, anywhere up to 2400. It's not a terrible ideal. You can run 4 alacrity enhancements to hit that. It's a very lazy method of doing so. So that's totally an option. Typically, most people will end up doing that to help smooth out their GCDs and avoid things like phantom GCDs or ghost GCDs. If you have that issue quite often, I highly recommend checking out your controls and preferences and turning on the ability action queue window. Not only that, test different settings. So for example, over here on NA, I don't see a reason to ever go over 0.5. Anything higher than that feels very unresponsive because I am from NA. My MS is not over 100 here, so there's no need for me to really increase that. When it comes to classes a little bit more spammy or have like roll, for example, operative, I play on 0.25 or even 0.0 sometimes on them. However, when it comes to other things that are not as spammy, 0.5 is a good solid place to be. But when it comes to playing things that are high MS, so for example, if you're not from America and you're playing on NA, you know, you probably are over 100 MS. Highly recommend checking out the 0.75. And if you're from NA and you're playing DM, same thing, 0.75. That's what I use over there. It feels good. Gets rid of a lot of my ghost GCDs, phantom GCDs. That issue kind of evaporated when I swapped that. I think at first I thought it would be unresponsive like it is on NA when I play with that. However, it actually just solves the issue entirely for me. So that's one thing to think of. So if you really want to min-max your alacrity and get rid of that issue, definitely tweak that. Other than that, this is pretty much the standard build. You can go accuracy. Accuracy is incredibly useful. The main reason you want to go for accuracy is when you run Sin Second Amulet or you're running Cauterized Coronary, you find a lot of value. But also at the same time, when it comes to kind of focusing on a single target player, a lot of your damage is going to be from obviously Rage Burst, but when it comes to single target, you're going to be looking at Obliterates. You'll be looking at Fierce Strike and Vicious Throw. These three abilities hitting is pretty vital to your single target burst. So 5% accuracy can be very useful. However, most of the time I'll run about 3,000, or not 3,000, but one enhancement, which is about 3%. And then sometimes I'll run the accuracy stem as well, which will bring up to 4%. Sometimes I will do that, and that's not terrible, but it's not great. It does minimize the stat waste, which is pretty helpful, but at the same time, there is a complete argument for 5%. Other than that, high alacrity is also viable. It's very fun, but I'll leave that for the best in slot video. So if you are interested in that, please check that out. Other than that, our stats will pretty much stay the same here. Now going into our implants, the only thing that will kind of like swap out is Fearless Victor. That's mainly because the value of Champion's Precision is greater than Fearless Victor. Most of our bursts will always be going off during Enrage. But when it comes to swapping out Fearless Victor, you have things like Nimble Master and Second Wind. I do not own Nimble Master, so I can't show you, but basically increases your movement speed during Saber Ward. This is really good in pretty much any arena, if that makes sense. So it allows you to be a lot more mobile and escape, and sometimes even reset if players are very bad at chasing you. Regardless, it's an interesting sub bonus and a fun one at that. Other than that, there's not much that you change here. Your implants and sub bonuses are just pretty generic. Then we obviously run Mastery and Power. If we're running high alacrity, you're going to be changing your Power Relic for critical. And then when it comes to tacticals, you're looking at Enrage Crush most of the time. Let's say if you don't have Tech Frags and you're like new to the class, you can buy Grit Thief off the GTN. That's a great option. Overall offense is also a decent option if you already own it. And then when it comes to Sin Second Amulet, this is a great one if you're more of like a duelist or you're just focused on doing Swtor damage or just really want to punish one player and you like to see Fierce Strike. It is really good. It's not a bad one. It will change your rotation slightly. And the whole concept of that is that when you use your Force Crush, you'll get about 1 GCD window-ish, roughly. Maybe about 2 GC windows to get a no cost Fierce Strike after Force Crush. That's something that you really want to pay attention to and keep in mind of, especially in your opener when it comes to Sin Second Amulet. But other than that, it's mostly the standard. You'll just be using Fierce Strike more. Retaliation is already a core part of your rotation. And then you have Cauterized Coronary, which adds about 30k damage overall to your Fierce Strike each time you use it. So if you apply this to somebody, it does take a little bit to tick. So for example, let's just use it real quick. You'll see when I apply it here, it's about 8 seconds. So you're going to tick about 3 times. If you don't crit, it's only 15k damage, but if you do crit, it's about 30k. You see, we only got an extra 15k there. Not great, but overall, it's not a terrible tactical, and it's extra damage, right? But overall, cauterized coronary, excuse me, it's not one that I really use, if ever, anymore. The whole ideal of cauterized coronary, especially before the nerfs that happened to Fury, is that you can get this auto crit tied in with a lot of the critical buffs. You can still do this on Rage, but in general, the extra 30k damage versus potentially just getting an AoE. And Rage Crush is just, I don't know, the value It's up to you. Obviously, single target damage versus AoE damage. Another thing is too, with Enrage Crush, you're not just making it a an AoE, you're turning it into a burst ability as well. So for example, let's just go ahead and get 2 stacks before we do this. Force Crush into Raging Burst. So there, you're basically popping your Force Crush early to make an AoE, but you're also consuming all the dot damage for 1 big burst with your Raging Burst. This absolutely chunks things. And it is a way to basically make your dot now a burst ability instead of just yes, a dot. Typically, you do want to leave your Force Crush on targets if you're trying to kite. It's a very powerful slow, so that's the main drawback of taking this tactical. But the gain of it being AoE is very high, so really it's just a playstyle choice. So if you like to single target and duel more, this is not the tactical for you. But if you like to brawl more, this is definitely the tactical for you. So that's kind of like why I like to take it. I don't really join war zones to duel. If I wanted to duel, I would take arenas a little bit more seriously, but typically that that phase for me has left. It's long gone. Any sort of competitive in this game is just not really there anymore for me. Going into Biorhythm, this is an interesting tactical. I haven't been able to test it yet, but basically it increases your healing. So for example, this will do 166k. So if you do 30% of 423, it'll be 166k. But when we pull up our full stacks, so we'll get 5 stacks to increase our healing here. Setting random abilities. Now that we have 5 stacks, when I pop Endure, or I guess Endure, we get 182k instead. So that works on percent health heals. That's really interesting. So that means while you're doing damage, you'll be able to buff things like Second Wind, you'll be able to buff things like Enraged Defense, you'll be able to buff things like Endure Pain. You'll also be able to buff things like Med Pack. Very cool. Don't think it's good, but don't think it's bad, if that makes sense. It's obviously better on other classes, but you know, hey, sometimes that extra healing is actually going to make a decent difference on Rage Juggernaut because it doesn't really need a tactical. That's the kind of state that Rage Juggernaut is in. And the extra survival is always really nice, especially if you're already running Second Wind. Other than that, that's pretty much all your tacticals. That's all your sub bonuses. That's your gear. So if you have any questions specifically about gearing and or tacticals or implants or combinations that maybe I didn't mention here, feel free. There's definitely some interesting ways and different things that I haven't covered here, but for the most part, I think I've covered pretty much everything that is viable. Now we'll go into the next segment. All right, now going into defensives. This will be a longer part, so I'm going to try to split this up just a little bit. The first thing I want to show to you guys, as it is very important for your mobility, but also mobility is part of your defensive power as well, is that you can rebind caps lock or any other ability that you're comfortable with, or S button, to target nearest ally. So the whole ideal here is that if I use my caps lock, I can target a NPC, or in this case, if we were in PvP, it would be a nearby player. I can then use Enter Seed. This means that I'm able to use that as a root breaker. Rage specifically gets a root breaker on Enter Seed usage. This also repositions me and just helps with kiting in general, but it also means that I can immediately leap. It's going to create most of the distance required for leap, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you're targeting nearest and there's a melee, I want to move a little bit so you can, like, obviously target a ranged player instead of the melee. However, it does also apply 20% damage reduction to the person that you apply it to. So it is another tool to also help heal for your team. Enter Seed plus Taunt is about 50% damage reduction. That's a lot, and it can save somebody, especially during the opener. Now, going past that, we're looking at things like War Master, which will be a talent, huge, and then Developing Rage, which is 10% damage reduction. It's just a passive. The duration of these things are not very long, and the whole concept here is kind of core to the gameplay of Juggernaut in general. So I'll leap here, you'll see the 49, and then you'll see the 59. Whole ideal there, that's your damage reduction. You don't want to overlap defenses during that opener damage reduction, and when it comes to like the whole main first loop is to leap, get some burst, get a push, and then obviously you'll re-leap. I have to move to get a re-leap there, but basically it would be a lot more smooth than that. That means that you'll get that chain of 2 War Masters back to back, so that means that you'll get 8 seconds of 20% damage reduction. Obviously, if you're not very good at this, you can just kind of use it a little bit sooner. It's better to use it sooner than later and getting caught in a CC, but typically the whole ideal there is to get that damage reduction during the opener. And then also you get the extra damage reduction from using Raging Burst during that. So if you leap Raging Burst with Enrage, you get a pretty high hit, but also at the same time you're also getting some extra damage reduction, which will allow you to tank the opener a lot easier. And then once that's about to fall off, you have things like Reflect. Reflect is very good. I know a lot of people dog on Reflect, but it's actually very good. They removed the damage cap for Reflect in PvP. I'm sure there's probably still is one on it. However, it's way better than what it used to be. Highly recommend it, especially if you're playing against a lot of specs that can be reflected damage-wise. For example, AP, Arsenal, Marksman, Engineering. A lot of those specs can get their damage reflected back to them. You're not doing it for the damage sent back to you, you're getting Reflect to save you from taking that damage, if that makes sense. It's not like Operative Reflect, where you still take the damage, but you reflect the damage back as well. This one completely negates the damage, if that makes sense. That's why this Reflect is not bad, and there are people that dog on it, but it's completely unwarranted. It's not the same kind of Reflect as the other ones. Now, when it comes to Mad Dash versus Reflect, you're really looking at where you are in terms of gameplay and movement. So for example, if you're very good at movement, you're confident in your ability to finesse other players, and you're able to abuse line of sight and in just general usage of S control, Mad Dash will usually be better 9 times out of 10, allow you to do a lot more things that you previously weren't able to do, and it also offers a 0.5 second dodge. So while timing, you can dodge things. But however, since it's a 0.5 seconds, there's a lot of desync available, which means that you can get things happening through your Mad Dash, which sucks. However, you know, there is always Reflect as an option. It won't be the same ability, but it will allow you to secure things, especially when it comes to arenas. So that's ultimately a playstyle choice, either mobility or Reflect. Sometimes Reflect is probably just going to be something that you want to do for arena, specifically in certain setups, because the value of Reflect will be very high. Outside of that, Mad Dash is usually the go-to. Highly recommend learning how to use Mad Dash and then learning how to use Reflect. Now, when it comes to Fear, I don't even bother. It's not a thing. So really, it's just between those two. Now, going into your actual defenses outside of that is Endure Pain. Endure Pain increases your health overall. So that means when I pop it, I have 548k health. Now, with that in mind, you also have a couple percent HP heals. So for example, second one is percent HP heal, and Warzone Medback is also a percent HP heal. So this means during Endure Pain, it'll do more healing. This is vital to know and vital to take advantage of. So for example, you're about to get a second wind proc from getting a kill, or a contribution to a kill. Using Endure Pain before that can be pretty beneficial. Just give you a lot of healing. Second wind plus medpack can usually max you out health-wise, which is incredible. Other than that, Endure Pain is a double-edged sword defensive. You want to be very careful when using it. If you don't have second wind or a way to use, basically get health back to use the defensive properly. It's a very scary defensive, if that makes sense. A lot of the nuance things to Juggernaut in general are the defensives, and Endure Pain is probably #1 on the priority there, or I guess the skill. This is all in one take, so forgive me. I am going to butcher some words here. Then I would say Enraged Defense and Saber Ward are the other two. They're very important, but they're not always effective, if that makes sense. So for example, Enraged Defense, you can get really greedy against dots, assuming they don't have dot explosion. The greedier you are, or it's not really even greed. If it pays off, it's not really greed, but the whole concept is like greeding it and pushing it to the limit. And sometimes you're gonna die for that. So it really just takes experience to know, is it safe to do that or is it not safe to do that? And when it comes to using Endure Pain, things like Reflect and Worsen Eternal, or even sometimes Mad Dash, it can be good to kind of make sure that you don't immediately die when you pop it when you're low health. It's less so useful with Mad Dash because Mad Dash is going to dodge things. But when it comes to Reflect, it's going to be extremely valuable. And when it comes to Eternal, it's going to be extremely valuable because it's going to give you extra damage reduction, especially if you're able to get a leap as well. If you have a leap and Raging Burst DR, you don't necessarily need to overlap with a general, but it'd be good to pay enough attention to the animation of Brawn. That's what it used to be called. That was a vengeance only thing. Actually, don't really seem to have a great animation for it, but it's that blue aura around you. I don't know why it's blue. The animation used to be a lot better, but when that aura disappears, that's kind of like your indicator that your CC immunity is gone and your damage reduction is gone. And then you would follow that with a journal. Now that we've explained most of that, Enraged Defense is really interesting. With the cooldown reduction, you're able to potentially get a second ED in arenas, which will allow you to basically auto-win the match, because you'll be able to take almost 2 million health damage. That's a lot for pretty much anything besides Madness and Lethality. However, do keep in mind that you don't have the same damage reduction if you're not able to constantly leap and keep uptime. And as I said before, the best defense is a good offense. It's very true for this class. You need to leap, you need to be using your smash and Raging Burst on cooldown to maintain that DR as well. Then going into the final thing, obviously Blade Turning. Very, very useful. Basically gives you full immunity to white damage for the first 2 seconds, but outside of that, you have defense chance, and if you get stunned, defense chance is useless, and then you'll damage the sword. It's still useful if you do get stunned. Chances are you probably will get stunned on your Saber Ward. It's usually the last thing that you get pop. And hopefully, if you cycle your defenses decently, especially if you're able to use your Endure Pain aggressively early on, you'll have a second Endure Pain to pair after your Saber Ward is gone. Hitting all your defenses as a panic, a terrible thing to do, but it's better to hit your defenses than not hit them, and it'll take a long time to like get truly comfortable. I highly recommend learning in regs, especially if you want to play more comfortably, because just jumping into arenas without having a full knowledge of your defenses or how to properly use them, you're not gonna like playing Rage. Other than that, I think we actually covered pretty much all the defenses and everything that I kind of wanted to cover here in one go. That's surprising. I tried multiple times before and I failed. I probably am forgetting something, so if you are interested in more in-depth defensive management and or like the whole concept behind like how to use things and how things can play out differently, feel free to leave a comment. I'll be more than happy to explain or give you examples or how something could probably play out. On top of that, I do have a lot of videos on Juggernaut in general, arenas, 8v8s, whatnot, so you can see gameplay and kind of like get the idea of how I use things. And then the defensive guide that I made for AV8 and 4v4s goes over Juggernaut as well, and Rage specifically, so that's one thing to also look out for. They'll probably reiterate a lot of the information that I've already shared, but there might be some things that I forgot. Other than that, that'll be it for the defensive segment. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to tackle pretty much anything. All right, now going into priority and rotation. First thing I want to teach you is that destruction is very important. Force, Crush, and Enrage builds destruction. It's this thing right here called Shockwave. This is the same on Fury as well. So the whole idea here is that you want to loop one rotation loop with Force Crush and one rotation loop with Enrage. During Enrage, you also get an extra 20% critical from your implant. So the whole idea when you're opener with Enrage, you're going to try to prioritize all your high damaging abilities. So for example, if you're not running Enrage Crush, this is the kind of ideal that you want to use. So for example, when you leap, you're going to pop Enrage, use your Raging Burst, Obliterate, Furious Strike, Dispatch, Scream, Retaliate, and then you can use Obliterate again. You need some Rage. But typically that's going to be your ideal, and then you're going to be able to immediately Enrage, Furious Strike, and so on and so forth. That's kind of like how your opener will always be if you're not running Enrage Crush. When you're running Enrage Crush, it's going to be a little bit different. So you can do some tricks. Now this is something that's going to be very important. So if you are an experienced player, this will actually help you. And even if you're not an experienced player, this is something that can help you a lot. So for example, before the match starts, so even in arenas, you can do this. You can pre-pop your Enrage to build Rage. So for example, you're like 25 seconds out from a match starting, or 22 seconds roughly. It really depends on how long the walk is to get into combat. You can pre-pop your Enrage. So basically what happens here is you're going to build a lot of Rage, and once you are basically about to hit max Rage, what you can do is hit Smash. Smash is going to be free, so you can also hold on to it a little bit longer, but the whole idea here is that you can get 2 smashes out to prevent too much decay before the match is about to start. And then with the decaying Rage, it is honestly better to just smash the whole time to try to prevent the decay as much as you can, except for when the buff falls off there. So for example, that smash right there, hopefully you're already in combat so the buff doesn't fall off. But having that extra Rage going into the match is nice. Just remember when the buffs fall off, your smash will actually cost Rage. Other than that, that is a core thing. So for example, we can actually just go ahead and do that with Enrage Crush to just show you how that would work. So we'll pop that. Unfortunately, we have to wait, so it's just complete waste here, but the whole concept should make more sense. For example, now we're just waiting for the poster falling off. We'll have it back, and we have Smash back, so we have some Rage to start off with. So we'll immediately jump in, and then we'll immediately Obliterate to get the CDR rolling, plus get the second Dominate, and then we'll Enrage, Dispatch, for Scream, Retaliates. Before Retaliate, we actually should be using Obliterate. My bad, but concept is there. If you're not able to do the Enrage thing, or you just forget it, the alternative route that you're going to be doing is Sundering Assault. So it'd be a leaping and Sundering Assault. This does mean that you can get CC'd during your burst window, which is unfortunate, but you're going to get the majority of your burst off before. So the whole ideal here is Sunder, Obliterate, Force Crush, and Rage and Burst. And then we go into the rest of the abilities. Overall, not too complicated. Does change the rotation a little bit, but it's not a crazy change, if that makes sense. There's also alternative. So when you are getting combat resets all the time, so you're gonna get your rage stacked up pretty high just from combat resets in general, but you're gonna get leap reset, you're gonna get rage reset as well. So you can do things like this. You can leap in, pop force crush, hit and rage, pop it with that. So you can get all your damage buffs all at the same time to do like a super burst, which is pretty nice. And especially if you're getting combat resets quite often, you'll be able to chain those a lot, and that's a lot of damage. So any chance that you get into like an 8-man stack, doing this is just going to be the maximum damage that you can do. And you can also just use smash instead of rage and burst in that situation, which will be way more damage. Hopefully that explains it pretty well. When it comes to full-on rotation, I'm not covering full-on rotation because it's PvP, but the whole ideal is that when it comes to priority, destruction and how you use it, as shockwave, force crush and enrage are the two loops. Then it comes to raging burst. That's like one of the buffs that you always want to keep up. So typically when it comes to priority, it's going to either be enrage or force crush. Just remember that they're not necessarily the ability that you use, it's just an ability that you keep track of. Use one before each raging burst or each smash. There's some rare occasions where you'll just get 2 stacks to dominate and just use smash without destruction. That's completely okay. But typically the whole ideal there is that you're trying not to overlap destruction, and then outside of that you're going into a priority system of obliterate, number 1 priority, and then you're going into Fury Strike, number 2 priority. Vicious Throw will be number 3 if it's available, so if you've left or they're just low. And then number 4 will be Force Scream. The main reason that it'll be a Force Scream is because if you take the AoE version, which I highly recommend, it'll be the most damage, and it'll still get in the enrage window. And then Retaliation. Retaliation can't miss, and it's decent damage. And it should catch the last nick of Dark Synergy. So those will be your core abilities. So always after you use Rage and Burst, you'd be looking at Obliterate, Fury Strike, Dispatch, or a Vicious Throw, or Scream, Retaliation. Always remember those, and if you're ever needing to do damage while you're still running away, you can do that. It's a highly recommended thing to do, especially if you're taking Ravage Root, which I don't recommend, but it's very helpful to secure a free leap. Now with both styles kind of explained a little bit. If you have any questions specifically, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help. Other than that, when it comes to like PvE parsing, Rage is going to parse completely different because it's going to use the 0-second cooldown thing, which is this one right here. I don't know how to say that, so I'm not going to bother. So it'll just be a lot different, and it's kind of not great. If you do want a bigger breakdown and kind of like how the rotational loop will go, I'll be happy to cover it specifically, but for the most part, I think to avoid this from going on too long, I'm just going to cut it here. Again, obviously, if you have any questions, like I've said in every other section, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help. All right, now we're going to talk about how important positioning is and kind of like your playstyle as well. I've been butchering words quite a bit. I've been here commentating for a while. A lot of this is a one take, and I keep making some interesting bloopers, but I didn't really care to edit and add those in, even though they'd be pretty funny. So let's get into positioning. Since you're a frontliner, but you're a squishy one, essentially you're trying to take advantage of distractions, but sometimes you may be the only front line, and with time you can slowly learn how to handle those situations. The ability with Rage Juggernaut definitely allows it, so don't be discouraged. While you're not a PPT with range, you do have quite a few ranged abilities, and Ravage channels damage after activation, meaning weaving and creating distance between abilities is excellent to deny damage on yourself against other close range melee, but also abusing line of sight if ever available. 1.4 seconds is a lot of time, and once the ability has gone, you have a brief time before the next ability is actually going, and since they're instant, line of sight abuse is the best thing on melees. Ravage is the typical ability to use to avoid downtime, damage-wise, to get another leap if push and mad dash are not available. Alternatives are Force Crush and Scream. Applying a slow to make the leap even easier to get off. One huge thing to think about for every melee is, sure, you're melee, but you don't have to be in the thick of it. You don't have to super stack on players. Actually, stacking is not beneficial to you whatsoever. The true specs that benefit from them are pyro, lethality, and vengeance, which you are not. The biggest counter to them is also just walking away, so movement again is extremely important. You want to pull people away or push them away into a 1v1 situation. You thrive against most classes, even if they have support. You can easily lock up 2 players at a time when there isn't sufficient damage or control to keep you at bay, allowing you to truly do your job of control and shut down, which is and was the main identity of Juggernaut back in the day. With that said, your escape potential is really only there if you can fully recover, or if dying makes relatively a large impact. In Warzone, it's typically better to respawn and get your free double stack opener to just push them back once again, instead of trying to kite away and get cleaved with your team by ranged. The moment you push back, the melee presence weakens, and if you don't have a strong frontline, it'll crumble, so it's a call on how you want to play. Embrace respawn or potentially get pushed out completely. People give up far too easily these days, and this could cause the match to go either way, and could ultimately decide whether players want to stick together or not. Most ranged players confuse their ability to survive as skill, but it's more so rather the fact that everyone is already preoccupied dealing with the front line, which is sometimes the bigger threat. Ranged as a function can't frontline most of the time, even more so against something like APPT or Ranged Juggernaut, so it is very important to know that they thrive the more time they get to freely play. Defensively playing range will always be worse than defensively playing melee, with a few exceptions going both ways. It's a judgment call at the end of the day, and losing presence, even if sometimes psychological, can turn tides. As I am rambling a bit here, I just want to get to the point that frontline's role is very important, and there's quite a bit of psychology that actually goes into it. Players will be defensive when you're there because of your ability to shut them down. This also goes for your team when you're not there. No longer having a frontline means range play defensively. Most range don't handle it well at all, therefore almost eliminating your team's damage all at once. It's a bad place to be, and sometimes until there's a reason for the vast majority of players to learn their class, it's always going to be a thing to think about. Now, when it comes to positioning in most situations, what I'm talking about is, let's say we're playing a high brigade. And let's say I wish there was like a creator thing where I could just go into high brigade and show you firsthand. But I do have a lot of shortcuts listed on my shorts playlist, and I also have it covered in my guide to combat. So for example, let's pretend this is the wall where you can jump up. You see me jump up all the time and get up there on the top layer. Abusing that, and there's a lot of little niche like line of sight spots as you brush up against the wall and going around. Most range will sit over here and they'll go around this way. You actually use this pillar all the time to line of sight. It's really just about being mindful of where you are and making yourself a nuisance to hit. That's the whole concept to it. How can I be the most annoying to hit? How can I break his channels? How can I break his cast? How can I make it so that he is more likely to tab off of me than just rage tunnel me the whole time? Unfortunately for me, people will tunnel me no matter what. They will sit there and target me. I will be dead. They'll still target me. I will sit behind a wall for 30 seconds at a time. They will still target me. So, unfortunately, sometimes that will happen and there's nothing you can do. But if you're not me, chances are you're not going to have that issue as much, and you're going to be able to abuse the fact that line of sight and just being a nuisance in general is going to benefit you much better than it will for me. And when it does benefit me, it is almost unfair. Regardless, positioning is something extremely important, and it's something that's completely underrated in a lot of players' minds. This is something that you'll see, especially in other games, especially like WoW, where positioning will be one of the most important things in high elo. Other than that, I'd say this segment is pretty much covered. But if you guys have any questions about movement or how to abuse your movement better, feel free to leave a comment. Now, the final section here, I'll save the outro, we'll be talking about our talents. I'll try to show a little snippet of the Republic version that's the same as this. But for example, these are the talents that I run. Alternatively, you can just listen to me and find the ones that match. So for example, we have Unrelenting Rage. This is the trauma option for Raging Burst. You can hit really high with Unrelenting Rage, especially if you're running Rage, or not Rage Engine, but Obliteration. You actually get a proc for this. It's probably one of the ways that you can get the highest hitting Raging Burst in the game, especially with Pulled Hatred. However, 9 times out of 10, I just don't find value for this. The trauma is not necessary, and most of the time that you find value in trauma, there's another way or better way to get trauma application. Subjugate, which is the AoE Raging Burst, it is not good. Don't bother with it. The random use case is literally just number farming, so even then, it's not great. You lose a lot of overall damage on all your abilities to gain an AoE on an ability that is better off using Swtor, and you have an AoE replacement for it called Smash in the first place, so it's not optimal in any way. It's much better to use Dark Synergy and then just use Smash instead. The critical hit chance and critical hit damage is far better, and its uptime is far better. Then we go into 27. This is really just a choice between Ravage Root and AoE Slow, AoE Scream. Typically, AoE Scream is just better. However, if you're more of a duelist or you are playing arenas and you want to ensure that you're going to get your leap when you Ravage, I highly recommend Ravage Root. It does have a lot of value, but overall, when it comes to true value, when it comes to overall damage and just control, I personally think AoE Scream is far superior, and Overwhelming Slashes is kind of like a crutch. Now going into 39, we have basically a mini shield. It's okay. Seething Defense. Rage Engine is also pretty decent. However, it does throw off your rotation a little bit. This works a little bit better when you're not running Enrage Crush, so do keep that in mind. And then you also have Obliteration. This one's really cool. You would think this is for heroics, and it definitely is. However, you can get this to work in PvP as well. And when you do, it's a lot of fun. It doesn't take anything too crazy to set up. You just need to use Obliterate before somebody dies. And then after that, if you have Leap and a Rage, you can just use that and pop a very high Raging Burst. I believe I got 139k with a Raging Burst while having this passive up. Very deadly, very nice. It does increase your chain killing potential, which Rage is already really good at. Then we have these three. Fierce Power is a scam. Don't take it. You'll get a lot of GCD locks, and it's just overall not good anymore. Domination is the #1 talent here. This kind of completely changes the way Juggernaut plays in 7.0, and part of the reason why it's so good and so easy for most players to play. And then you have the 0-second cooldown during Enrage. This is really cool. It's meta and PvE for a lot of things, I'm pretty sure. However, it is not as applicable for PvP, and when it comes to just Fear Strike spamming and whatnot for PvE, or I mean PvP, you do have to run the risk of missing your abilities. So if somebody pops Saber Ward and you popped in Rage, you don't have a stun. Yeah, GG, your damage in a way. Now going into 51 and above, these are kind of just personal, or not personal, but are kind of like things you can't change, they're kind of like static. So for example, you'll always go Warmonger because the value is just better than the other two. Then War Master is just so much better than the other two that you can't even think about running them. But then it's Mad Dash versus Reflect. Sometimes Reflect will be better, and sometimes Mad Dash will be better. It's a really a playstyle thing, but also at the same time, if you're ever in a situation where there's heavy bursts and you really need to mitigate it, there's no other way to do it. Reflect will be the move. Then last you have Bold Hatred. Bold Hatred I pretty much always go in 8v8s. Arena sometimes I'll go through Passion, but for the most part I don't bother with through Passion 8v8s. The main reason is because you can just run Second Wind with very little damage loss, and Bold Hatred always gets value. Other than that, that's pretty much your talents. I don't change them up very often. This will be like if I'm in 8v8s having fun, this is probably what I would run right here. But if I'm playing like arenas and I'm focusing a little bit more, and maybe I'm running like Nimble Master as well. If I was to play arenas, then we actually had ranked arenas again. I'd probably run something like this with Nimble Master. And the main reason why I would still take the AoE Scream Slow is because of the value of the slow. It allows you to kite a lot easier. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a lot to think about when it comes to talents, and there's a lot less noob bait on Rage Juggernaut, thankfully, and that's probably part of the success for the class overall compared to a lot of the other ones. Consider this a section, I suppose it's like complete. I swear I'm forgetting something, but I'm most likely not. Anyway, if you guys have any questions about talents, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you. Alright, now to the closing here. Since we did go over quite a bit, and hopefully this video is not too long, and if it is, I'm sorry. To re-emphasize of what we've gone over here, Rage is really good. It's a frontliner, which means it will get the brunt of the focus regardless. This is also a class of little to no escape and target number one in arenas for a reason. The spec embodies the aggressive playstyle like Fury and WoW and old Marauder's Fury playstyle. It used to have a more unique style to it, but now it's more of a powerhouse than ever before, making it more interesting in my opinion. However, the skill floor is almost entirely on the basic rotational concepts and defensive management, so when it comes to learning the spec, you really need to take some time to get used to the abilities instead of judging it early to 1 or 2 bad matches. If you're not down to be target number 1 or frontline in war zones, I truly recommend checking out something like Lethality, as it'd be more suited for you. This is one of 2 hyper-aggressive specs that are relatively functional for melee that still exist. We used to have more, but defensively or offensively, they've been gutted really badly. If you haven't played Rage, it's definitely something you should experience, as it's quite fun. One of the most fun specs of 7.0, in my opinion. Other than that, I believe I've covered everything I've wanted to, while also giving some tools to excel or move forward on the spec. If you want more information, feel free to simply ask. I am happy to help. If you want to see gameplay, I have playlists sorted via spec that I'm playing, including commentaries. And lastly, thanks for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.